big welcome to you as we move into Series 2 of Experience Living Purposefully into Your Very Own Story. Experience 2 has experiences 11 to 20, and each one of these experiences is some aspect of how our very own stories interweave. Experience 17 deals with the aspect of how there are inner self-awareness wipeout patterns. Let us pause. Sit comfortably on your chair. Leave all else's distraction as you are present to this image. What thoughts and feelings arise in you? Just be present to these thoughts and feelings. When the time is right for you, let your awareness return to the energy of the room. Take one more moment now to ask yourself, how is that for me? And perhaps a word, phrase, sense, or image emerges. And perhaps you'd like to make a note of it. And I'm adding another note. You have just engaged your observer self. Now, this sculpture by Reverend Rosie Stower is another metaphor which throws more light in a different way on the pattern that I was illustrating through the two mountain metaphor used in this Series 2 set of experiences, and parallels with my metaphor here. If one takes the larger face as conscious reality, there is another, less mature face developing beyond conscious awareness. Both faces are inextricably a part of the whole. And both faces are wrapped around by a single cloth, which, as metaphor, could mean life experience. And for both faces, there is a larger common arena that is below conscious awareness. So far, in these Series 2 experiences, I have named a dual patterning of growth as being survival strategy and what goes into unconscious at first, inner self-awareness wipeout. Now, there are namings by other authoritative writers of this dual patterning of inner growth. And I'm going to name some examples by well-known authors and artists. The first one is Sacred Wound by Jean Houston. In The Search for the Beloved, she names that dual patterning as the sacred wound coming to healing. Gurdjieff, who brought the Enneagram from Afghanistan in 1910, names what I call inner self-awareness wipeout chief feature. And in his spirituality school, to be in touch with, name, and work on your chief feature, he saw as the basis for inner growth and balance. Compulsions. That was the early name that Enneagram wisdom frameworks called that part of us which went into drive. And then in the arrow theory within Enneagram wisdom frameworks, one dealt with what would be the balancing of that compulsion. The Enneagram wisdom frameworks of paired strategies and arrows also incorporate Gurdjieff's concept of chief feature as being the basis of inner growth to balance and wholeness. Shadow, dream work. Robert Johnson, in Owning Your Own Shadow, names the dual process as being that every conscious action has an unconscious repercussion that goes into a bag over your shoulder. John Bradshaw, who deals with this aspect and calls it inner child, has many strategies that are designed to put the reader in touch with his or her inner child, and he names it as that part of themselves that has been buried in the unconscious. First task, second task, Richard Rohr. In his CD, The Major Tasks of Life, Richard talks about a first task of life and later a call to a second task of life, which leaves something of the first task experiences and patterns behind. In my opinion, Richard Rohr's metaphor parallels the metaphor in this series, naming the building up of survival strategy residues of energy into the mountain in the foreground, and at the same time a paler mountain of energy residues from inner self-awareness wipeout consequences is forming in the background. Sacred Self, Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer, in his book Sacred Self, is, in my opinion, describing what I described earlier as coming to see the parts of us we are initially unaware of by listening to more than invitations as we gaze into the well of our sensory memory. The Real Me by Siga Kurda, an artwork poster. And here Siga Kurda has highlighted brilliantly the universal truths about the real me. He has a clown, and this clown has taken off his mask, and behind the mask is a sad face, and there is a little rose on the ground at his feet. Transformation. There is a multitude of writers and experts and people who work significantly in this field of human experience, and most of them could be in the category of a mask. A first perception that we have, which eventually gets moved aside, and there's another reality underneath that we didn't dream about. Give yourself some time now to let surface one or more tingles or clanks that have surfaced for you, as you've been present to these namings of a dual pattern of experience that is universal. Perhaps speak or write what surfaces. This universal dual patterning of growth is a basic process to being birthed to wholeness or balancing, and it has 3 stages prior to the birthing. The first stage is developmental, and the second stage is transitional, and this transition usually begins with some form of pain, shock, sense of restlessness, dissatisfaction. And the third stage is the invitational, to accept something that we didn't know about ourselves, and or to let go older patterns. Monica Brown, in Come to Me, reminds us that more than energy is accepting of us as we are, and it will provide rest and will tend to our inner journeying needs. Come to me, all you who are burdened and weary, and I shall give you rest. Come to me as you are, and I shall tend to you.
Come to me, all you who are burdened and weary, and I shall give you rest. Come to me as you are, and I shall tend to you. Come to me, all you who are burdened and weary, and I shall give you rest. Come to me as you are, and I shall tend to you.
A summary. There is a universal dualing pattern of inner growth which is basic to the process of being birthed to wholeness and balancing. The process has a transitional stage which begins with some form of pain, shock, sense of restlessness or dissatisfaction, etc., etc., etc. This transitional stage holds an invitation to accept something we didn't know about ourselves, and or to let go of older patterns. And the outcome of such inner invitations is to provide us with the potential to become more whole and balanced. A strategy to increase my awareness of the stretching edges of my knowing about this me in my skin? Gift yourself with 7 to 10 minutes at the end of the day, allowing some facets of your dual patterning of inner growth to surface. And perhaps asking yourself the question, what are the stretching edges of my knowing about me in my skin today? Gently notice and receive what surfaces. Perhaps speak or write new information. The next morning, gift yourself with soaking in whatever aspect has most energy from the night before. Has experience 17 expanded your awareness of and knowledge of a dual universal patterning of inner reality? Note, my name, Inner Self-Awareness Wipeout, is for the at first unconscious awareness aspect of the pattern. Perhaps speak or write what surfaces. Experience 11 was of layers of feeling reactions in my very own stories that are stored. Experience 12 of how a first pattern of feeling reactions is repeated and becomes a survival strategy to cope with an imperfect world. Experience 13 is of how survival strategies impinge on life and living. Experience 14 of inner self-awareness wipeouts in my private self arena that are at first unconscious. Experience 15 of pools of pain. Experience 16 of a third layer of me in my skin. Here, archetypal and dream energy arisings are invitations to inner growth and balance. Experience 17 is of a dual patterning of growth which is basic to the process of being birthed to wholeness and balancing. So, know when you're invited to a new inner birthing? Experience 18. Thank you so much for listening to that little inner spark which led you to follow through with Experience 17.